Mentors talk to you and sponsors talk about you.
What are those like key resources that people are looking for when they go out and network?
It's not clear to me that it's scalable.
How can somebody practically start diversifying their network today?
Beautiful thing is when you let other people think that you think the world of them, they will think the world of you too.
Dr. Rosalind Chow, it is such a pleasure to have you on Transform Your Workplace. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Brent.
We're going to talk about your book. By the time this releases, the book will be out. It's called The Doors You Can Open, A New Way to Network, Build Trust, and Use Your Influence to Create a More Inclusive Workplace. And you started the book with a baseball reference. Of course, I want to start there because I'm a huge baseball fan. You share this powerful story. And actually, I didn't even quite realize it. But Kim Ng, who finally became Major League Baseball's first female general manager, so breaking barriers for the Miami Marlins. And probably after being repeatedly overlooked, and Derek Jeter comes along. We all know Derek Jeter, stepped in as her sponsor. What does this story tell us about the role a sponsorship plays? And you can define that if you want, by opening doors in a way that's maybe more impactful than a traditional like mentorship relationship would be.
Yeah. So I have a first confession of the podcast is that I actually am not a baseball fan.
No. Okay, it's
fine. But I actually, in researching this particular example, had to dig deep. So I had to learn a little bit more about baseball than I knew previously. But that aside, the reason I chose this particular example is, one, it's clearly one that involves people that people would be familiar with, but also to really illustrate the fact that oftentimes we get opportunities for things for which we are just completely qualified. And just being completely qualified was not enough. For some people. And in this case, for Kim Ng, because she was a woman, she was Asian, Major League Baseball, actually Major League anything, has yet to have, a woman in the top spot. So it was remarkable for that reason. And really wanting to highlight that it's not that people need mentorship. Sometimes people are great. They just need people to open the door for them.
That is so true. And what was Derek Jeter's role? Like, what was their relationship to lead to like that sponsorship, as you call it?
So Kim Ng actually was the assistant general manager for the Yankees when Derek Jeter was there during the Yankee dynasty years.
It was definitely a dynasty. You know enough about baseball. Clearly you did your research.
If there's one thing I know how to do, it's research.
Yeah, that's great. What, when it comes to what a sponsorship is compared to a mentorship, define that for the listener.
So the common saying is that mentors talk to you and sponsors talk about you. And I think what that actually highlights is this idea of who is being asked to change. So with mentorship, mentors try to make you better, right? The person they're trying to help. And with sponsorship, the sponsor already thinks you're amazing. And so the person that needs to change is actually other people. So what actually needs to happen is that the social environment around you needs to change, so that other people can actually recognize how great you are. So you want to think of who's being asked to change, how many people are involved in this situation. If it's just two, it's probably mentorship. But if there's more, then it's quite possibly sponsorship.
Yeah, in the book you said that gossip could actually be used for good. And I actually get this now that you're putting it together for me. It's like, the sponsorship relationship, that's when they're able to talk good behind your back, right? And maybe open the door a little bit more. What is good gossip in your mind?
Well, it can be really simple. Just I actually did this the other day. He's going to be so mad at me for telling the story. So I was in a meeting, and a colleague of mine had didn't have his Zoom background on. And so you could see in the background all of his paintings, which is not something that we ever talk about at work. And so for everybody in the meeting, I was just like, if you look at this guy's backgrounds, like those are all his paintings. First of all, he's a really accomplished painter. And by the way, he has actually exhibited his artwork. Wow. And the reason why this is important is because when you exhibit your artwork, it's essentially peer reviewed by people who know how to judge and evaluate artwork. So it's almost as impressive as publishing a research article. That's the equivalent for him. So isn't he so great to be not just an accomplished scholar, but also a really accomplished painter? And first of all, I think he was embarrassed that I called him out in that way.
Oh, why?
But also, nobody else would have known,
right?
If someone hadn't shared that, and no one's going to spontaneously be like, "Take a look at my artwork. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you where I've exhibited all of this." Right? So it's just celebrating other people's wins for them in a way, right? So that they can actually celebrate them publicly.
Yeah, that's so true. In a way, you were a sponsor in that case because you called it out. And then for other people who may have been zoned out in the meeting or not paying attention, they would never spark any curiosity around it until you probably said something about it. So now it's on their mind, oh, this person's a talented painter.
That's right. And then the next time they talk with him, they're going to have another thing to talk to him about that is not just work related.
Yeah, so clearly sponsors are opening doors, breaking down barriers. I'm curious if there's different types of sponsorship relationships or the role that a sponsor plays. If there's various types, what are those?
Yeah, so in the book, I talk about 4 different types of, so I wouldn't call them sponsor types per se, but sponsorship forms.
Yeah.
So meaning you can be a sponsor, but the way in which you sponsor can be really different. So there's no one way to sponsor, and how you choose to sponsor is really going to depend on what is happening in the situation and whether or not the other person already knows the person you're trying to sponsor. So that's a really key factor. If they know nothing about the person you're trying to sponsor, then all you have to do is just say wonderful things about them, right? If they maybe know about the person, but they don't know that much about them, right? Then this is just your way of augmenting those already positive impressions. So that's what I call confirming, because you're confirming a positive impression. We can get into the negative side. These are a little bit, not a little bit. These are rare because we don't often find ourselves in situations where people are saying negative things about each other. But if we do find ourselves in those situations, we can make a choice. Are we going to speak up and say that we disagree with other people's negative impressions? Or are we just going to stay silent and let it slide? So another thing that sponsors can do is they can protect, right? And that is essentially trying to mitigate or reduce other people's negative impressions.
Those are great. So networking, I say that word and it gives me anxiety just saying it out loud. I know for people who are seeking jobs, graduates, networking is key to finding that next role. You highlighted I think it was an HBR article that kind of outlined the things that people need to do as far as effective networking, and also we do networking to find resources and the connections that we need, right? What are those key resources that people are looking for when they go out and network?
Oh, great question. So I think a lot of it has to do with, so if they're probably looking for what we would call human capital, which is skills and abilities, like knowing someone who has a particular skill set. So, for example, as I've gotten older, I've come to realize that knowing doctors and lawyers is actually incredibly helpful.
Yes, it is.
Not having that skill set in my network would actually could become a problem for me, depending on what circumstances I find myself in. So there's the human capital part, but then you also have networking for social capital, which is you're networking with people who you know are popular because you want to be associated with popular people. And you want people to think well of you because of your association with them, which is why I'm so glad that I am neither a powerful nor popular person. Because then you right? Like that's just a terrible situation because then you're always second guessing why people are treating you the way that.
So that's a really good point. Yeah. A lot of pressure. You listed in the book, and I want to get your response to this, but like that old adage, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Like, do you buy into that? What do you think?
Oh, I mean, I totally do.
Yeah.
The problem with it's not what you know, it's who you know is that, and I explain this more in the book, the reason you should care about it isn't necessarily solely because people you know might be able to get you access to certain opportunities. It's because the people you know dictates what you know. Because the information you receive through your network is essentially curated for you by the people you know.
Yeah.
And so if you know a lot of people who are powerful and have access to a lot of really interesting information that nobody else has access to, that can be really beneficial for you, especially if they choose to share that information with you. Which is, again, kind of goes back to why people like to treat networking as this kind of like, I need to find the right, like high value targets, right?
Totally.
I need you to have the right skill set. I need you to be in the rooms where decisions are being made. But that is, again, this kind of very, for me, a really kind of icky way of thinking about networking because it's so transactional.
I was literally going to say the same thing. It's got the ick factor behind it, like seeking out the powerful, like, because that for the other person is like, there's ulterior motives clearly and all that. There's a really great part of the book that I wanted you to highlight, and I hope it's not polarizing because this person is very polarizing right now for a lot of people. The social capital aspect. You talked about this in the context. You know where I'm going with this.
I do.
The context of networking and the comparison you made between George Clooney and Elon Musk, who couldn't be completely more different. But this I found interesting the way you described the social capital part. So explain what you meant in the book and just how it relates to what we're talking about.
Certainly. So I know I'm so regretting that choice.
It's not, you wrote this a long time ago. You couldn't have predicted what was happening right now. So this is not political by any means right now. It's just for the example in the book.
No, So, in the book, what I do is I put together a hypothetical cage match between Elon Musk and George Clooney and basically ask this question of who has more social capital. And so on the surface, you might kind of be like, well, they're both famous. They're both wealthy. Although, let's just be clear, Elon Musk is like orders of magnitude. It's a very different kind of wealth. They both, are involved in philanthropic activities. They're both very well known in kind of their sphere of influence. But the argument that I make is that George Clooney has what I call small town social capital, which is where you have a very close knit group of friends and people that you know that you all kind of share the same values. And you see the world the same way. And so what that allows you to do is actually be incredibly efficient in coordination because of that strong bond of trust. Where Elon Musk really shines is in his what I call big city social capital, which is, when you're in a big city, typically the diversity of people that you might encounter is going to be greater than in a small town. And you might not have a strong relationship with everybody in a big city, but what it does allow you to have is access to all of that kind of diverse information, diverse perspectives, backgrounds. And that's really helpful for Elon Musk because as an entrepreneur, his whole thing is about innovation. And the way to make innovation happen is by taking ideas from multiple different spheres and essentially smashing them together to see if you can generate something new. And so having big city social capital for him is actually incredibly effective. Now, I do make the argument that in an ideal world, you have both.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But that there are multiple ways to have social capital.
Yeah. You highlight later on to Kim Eng's decision to I think she left the Chicago White Sox.
That's right.
And that was like small town capital, probably connected to small town people. And then balancing the big city, like getting that GM job in Miami. I'm sure there's steps along the way to get that. But is that a good example of how you could leverage both forms of social capital?
Yeah. So the thing about Kim Eng is that she was super strategic about leaving the White Sox, right? She very explicitly said, I did it for a reason. You can rise up within a particular team, but then all you're ever exposed to is the way that particular team does things. And what she really wants, so she ended up going to work for the the league, main office and also the commissioner's office. So she had actually two roles that were not tied to a specific team, but were kind of overarching the sport as a whole. And what that allowed her to do is create relationships and show her value to people in a non-adversarial role, right? Because if you're part of a team and you're engaging with people who are other parts of other teams, there's clearly going to be some competition or, some level of antagonism there. But if you're in the commissioner's office, you're trying to elevate baseball for everyone, right?
Right. That's a good point.
So you're seen in a different way, and it allows you to create relationships under different circumstances. And she went in knowing that. And that's actually how she made the move to the Yankees. Yeah.
How smart. Very smart.
I know.
So a key part of sponsorship is relying on trust that we have with others. And you said that many companies, when they build I don't know if it's sponsorship programs or if they're mentorship programs is what I hear a lot. Mm-hmm. They actually fail to neglect the trust part of it. Maybe you share an example of what a trust-based sponsorship program might look like inside of an organization if we were to do something formal.
Sure. So I actually work with a company right now, and I don't even know if I'm allowed to say who they are. So I'm going to not. You could just not share.
You could. Without I'm not getting sued. No, I was kidding.
But they actually have an amazing program. So basically, the way it's set up is the program team selects who gets to participate. Mm-hmm. And they also created this pool of potential sponsors. So these were people who were willing to make themselves available for the program, but without necessarily knowing that if they would be matched with anyone or not. And so basically, right. So, cause a lot of other programs, it's you find participants and you find sponsors and you just kind of try to find some way to shoehorn them into a relationship.
Usually never works.
And what I found so great about this one is that it's the matching was very, very intentional. And if they couldn't find an appropriate sponsor for a participant, they would just tell the participant that it was not their year. And if they couldn't find a good protege for a sponsor, they would just say like, thanks for your interest, but like, we don't have a match for you this year. So like, hold on. We also trained the sponsors about sponsorship before they even did anything with the proteges. So they had a better understanding of what they were getting themselves into. And finally, I would say the biggest thing about the program is that like the first 5 months of the program, we didn't ask for sponsors to do anything except get to know the protege. And so we built in this kind of guided relationship building sort of program where they would meet each other and have these guided, facilitated conversations with each other that were deliberately not focused on professional like work. We wanted them to get to know each other as people before they got to know each other as like employee and supervisor. Because when you trust someone, like it's all of that hierarchical stuff kind of like goes out the window.
Yeah.
It's really about the relationship that you have with each other as peers. And so that's what we were trying really hard to recreate. And I think we've done a pretty good job of it in that particular program, but it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of resources. So that's the other thing I would say is that, it's not clear to me that it's scalable.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenges I could see with like programs is, resource and time constraints, and also just the change, behavior change. So you talk about this concept of homophily in the book, and this is like this idea that most people's social networks consist of like people the same as them, and so like you're like in this homogenous type of group and never venturing outside of that. I imagine programs like this help to try to break that up a little bit and get you outside of your comfort zone, get to know other people with different levels of social capital. How do we do this effectively? It is a big question, but like that's a problem, isn't it? The homophily.
It absolutely is a problem. I don't go into this as much as I could have in the book, but the research on this is pretty clear. The only way that we're going to break out of homophily is if we are forced to interact with each other in like super structured ways. Yeah. And kind of like I have to say, like the military is kind of the best example of this.
Yeah, I can see it.
Really diverse, like group of people coming together, but they all have to work toward a common goal, and it builds these bonds that are incredibly strong, right? But like left to their own devices, that probably would never happen organically.
So true. And I think you're making a great point is like the benefits an organization will have to be diverse in terms of backgrounds and people and thought and all that. But having a clear mission and common goal that we're all trying to go after, like the military, because I think that could then break up the issue that we're talking about with just around the same people with the same thinking, and we'll never probably grow as a result of it.
Right. Yeah. No, that one's going to be a really hard one.
Yeah. So kind of on the same note, like meritocracy, we always talk about this in society, especially in our in the United States with just how capitalistic we are. You identify several problems with meritocracy. Explain why maybe just relying solely on merit is for like, especially for promotions and new opportunities might be problematic.
Yeah. So the issue with meritocracy is that we don't all agree on what merit is.
Yeah. It's right. Because it's subjective.
Right.
Unless we actually had some sort of measurement that was everybody agreed on.
Correct. Right. And so, there's this really great paper where the researchers interview people about what they think or how they think merit should be like measured. And some of them are like, oh, it's just about performance metric, right? And another group is kind of like, it's performance metrics plus like some not random, but like ethereal kind of like, who knows? So like how you make me feel kind of thing, right? And so there are kind of more narrow and broader ways of thinking about merit and how to assess merit. So there's this other part of like, well, is it just about what you yourself contribute in your own performance, or how do you take into account a person's impact on their team, or like, and their impact around, like on the people around them? So you could have someone who's, let's say, kind of an average performer, but who really amplifies and makes work more meaningful or fun, or, you know, really helps the productivity of the people around them. If you got rid of that person, all of that benefit would go away, but you wouldn't be able to capture that purely through looking at their own performance. And so, you know, I think it's really hard for people to agree on what merit is. So that's at least one problem with merit, is that we don't know what it is. We don't agree what it is. We don't know how to measure it. And so, yeah, it's a problem.
I want to go back a little bit to like how sponsorship happens in the first place. And I think there's one we talked about a little bit, which is you have some sort of formal program and it takes a long time to make the right people. The other idea you bring up in the book was this role of like shared values, and how values, and I don't know if you just have to speak openly about your values and project that out there to attract the right people, but that actually could attract sponsors. Do you believe that? And is there maybe a story or something that backs up that?
So here's what I would say. I don't know that you want to go out and be like, I believe in peace. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that's gonna move the needle for you.
Right. But maybe a vision or something, like a vision for like where, like if it's, you know, like in the case of Kim Ang, like her vision for what the team was going to do. And then that's how she gets the nod from Derek Jeter. I don't know.
Oh, I mean, I think that's probably true. I mean, for her, certainly her whole thing was like, I know what Derek Jeter is all about. He wants to win.
Yeah.
So
easy.
I'm just going to make that happen.
Yeah.
I think outside of that situation, I think it's actually more important for us to explain why we're driven to do the things that we do. You know, so
that's great.
In the book, I talk about how as an Asian woman, it was really uncomfortable to start this program, this executive leadership program for Black professionals. And there is a version of the introduction of the book where I actually open with me like in front of this very skeptical group of Black corporate, professionals, because I'm sure they were like, what on earth is this? But then I explained to them why I felt so incredibly passionately about making sure that they were able to get something of value out of the program. And I made it very clear to them, like, I did not design this program because I think any of you are remedial. This is not because there's anything wrong with you. This is entirely because the situation or the environment around you does not know how to value you. And so that's what this program is about. It's about making it so that your value becomes apparent to other people. And I made it very clear that that's an experience that all of us would really like to have, right? Is to be in environments where people see us and they see our contributions and they appreciate them. And all the different ways in which sometimes our contributions are not valued for a variety of reasons. I think they could tell I felt very passionately about that. And they thankfully embraced me into their group. It was truly a wonderful experience. But again, like if I had just been like, hey, my name is Rosalind Chow, I'm a faculty member here, I publish all these papers and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I guess they might be impressed with my accomplishments, but they wouldn't truly understand the core of who I am. And that's the part that I think is often missing in how we talk about ourselves. Is we talk about what we do, but we don't talk about why we do it.
That's so well said. For individuals like who don't have like the formal corporate program to help us like develop sponsorship and other relationships that we are trusting, you talk about diversifying our social diets, engaging with strangers and acquaintances as much as they do with close friends and family. I believe this to be important, but it's an uncomfortable situation for many people, especially with anxiety or just maybe imposter syndrome, whatever it may be. How can somebody practically start diversifying their network today?
So the way I talk about it in the book is that you want to think about whether or not you lack diversity because you go to spaces where diversity doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Or it's very possible that you go to places where diversity is available to you, but you just don't approach people who are different. And so what you can do if you want to is actually be a little more intentional about approaching people who are unknown to you. And this is a lot easier if you have an established routine and you see the same people over and over again. And so you can, it's like how people make friends at like coffee shops. Is you see the same people coming, you have about kind of the same routine. And then over time, you kind of start doing the nonverbal, like, not that your listeners can see me, but it's like the little head nod of acknowledgement, right? But you can also do it differently. You can look for cues that other people might be interested in having a conversation. So you could stage books that you're reading, right, at a coffee shop, if you so desired, to try and entice people to come chat with you about the book you're reading. Or if you notice somebody else reading a book that seems interesting, you can be like, hey, that looks like I was thinking about reading that. Like, what do you think? Yeah. I do this all the time, actually, in grocery stores. And I have to admit that this is probably strongly gendered. Your listeners should also know that I am like barely 5 foot. So I'm very small and non-threatening. But sometimes when I'm stuck in the grocery store lines, if I see something interesting in somebody else's basket, I'll be like, oh, is that good? Because sometimes, maybe they,
That's so non-threatening. I love that.
Or if it's clear that they've put some sort of thought into their attire that day. So I often, because I wear glasses, I will often notice when people who wear glasses try to like match their frames to something else that they're wearing. And so I like to acknowledge that, just to be like, I see you. I see that effort that you put in there. Right. And usually that at the end of the day, at the very least, they have a boost because they're like, somebody noticed me today and I was a person to them and worthy enough to compliment. And the other version is we actually start having a nice conversation and I find out where they got their glasses, and then maybe I can go find funky glasses there too.
Those are some great tips. So I didn't manage time great because we were having such an awesome conversation. I want to have you like wrap up this conversation in terms of like, what's the biggest idea that you want people to take away from this conversation? Also, like give people an action item too. Like what's a great step in terms of like, we need more sponsors. We need more people positively gossiping about other people, like what are some things that they can take away from this conversation?
Sure. So the thing that I want people to take away from this is that everyone can be a sponsor. It doesn't matter. Like most of us are like, well, I'm not Derek Jeter. Like what, what do you expect of me? And I just want everyone to know that like, you don't have to be Derek Jeter to be a sponsor, because what sponsorship depends on is whether or not people trust you. And everybody has someone who trusts them, you know? And so if you have people who trust you, that means that you can tell them things that you like, and you can tell them about people you like, and you can help create relationships between people you like and admire. And so if there's a person that you feel very fondly about, I would say, who else do you know who should know this person? I know that's a very awkward way of putting it, but it's like, who should know the people I know? Presumably the people you know and you like are people you admire for a variety of reasons. And so why not try and get other people to know them too? Because clearly you think the world of them. So I'm sure other people will also think the world of them. And the beautiful thing is, when you let other people think that you think the world of them, they will think the world of you too.
Oh, so beautifully said. I love it. Dr. Chow, what's the best place people could either buy the book or learn more about your work? You said you wrote a lot of papers. What if people want to go really deep on this and go see all your work? Where's the best place for that?
So let's see. So purchasing the book anywhere you prefer. If you're an Amazon person, you can do that. I personally push for bookshop.org. So that's supporting the independent bookstores. You can follow me on LinkedIn. So actually on LinkedIn, I tend not to write about my own research. I tend to write about other people's research.
Oh, that's great.
But every now and then, if I have something to celebrate, I might share something.
You gotta self-promote once in a while. It's so hard to do. I'm terrible about it too, but you gotta do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm very good at celebrating other people because I'm trying to live my book.
Yes.
But if you're actually interested in the research that I've done, you can go to my website, www.rosalindchow.com.
My guest today has been Dr. Rosalind Chow, the author of the brand new book out April 8th, The Doors You Can Open, a New Way to Network, Build Trust, and Use Your Influence to Create a More Inclusive Workplace. Dr. Chow, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much. I had a great time.